Hello everyone, welcome to another character breakdown. Today we'll be looking at the Jedi who hunted down Darth Bane, Johun Othone. He lived about 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. Let's get into it. Also, I couldn't find too many pictures for this character, so bear with me when the pictures don't change that often. Johun was born in 1019 BBY on Sumeria on a farm, but when he was 10 he was found by the Jedi. At this time the Jedi were at war with the Sith. The Sith had formed an order called the Brotherhood of Darkness which held thousands of Sith. In response, Jedi Lord Hoth formed the Army of Light made of Jedi. Due to the increasing need for forces, even Padawans fought on the front lines. Johun became Lord Hoth's Padawan and fought in the Battle of Ruusan. When the Brotherhood of Darkness was failing, Sith Lord Darth Bane convinced the Brotherhood of Darkness to create a thought bomb, a weapon that targeted all Force-sensitive beings in the area. Hoth learned about this and evacuated thousands of Jedi off-planet, Johun included. Johun went with another Jedi Lord known as Valentine Farfalla. The thought bomb went off, killing Lord Hoth and all Jedi in the area as well as the Brotherhood of Darkness. The Jedi assumed this was the end of the Sith. Little did they know, Darth Bane survived and even took a new apprentice. Johun was crammed on the Farfalla's ship with many other Jedi who evacuated Ruusan. He felt guilty over his master's death, so he wanted to help with the recovery effort. However, Farfalla wouldn't allow him, saying there could be after effects or other consequences with the thought bomb that could still affect Force-sensitive, so it was too dangerous. Despite this, Johun disobeyed and snuck onto the recovery team headed for Ruusan. Once they got close enough towards the surface, they spotted two people in Sith mercenary armor. Johun told the rest to keep going and that he would take them prisoner and wait for a new ship to come get them. When Johun approached them, he noticed they were frightened and they told him that a Sith had survived the thought bomb. Johun brought them back to Farfalla's ship where they tried to lie their way out of punishment, saying that they were really farmers on Ruusan instead of mercenaries for the Sith. Johun asked about the Sith Lord they watched kill their friends, but they seemed too occupied with getting out of trouble to tell the truth about the encounter. Farfalla then called Johun to his office where he told Johun he was disappointed in him for using his Force abilities to sneak onto the shuttle to Ruusan. Johun admitted he was wrong for that but wanted to talk to Farfalla about the Sith sighting. However, Farfalla didn't believe the mercenaries. Johun tried to argue with him, but when Farfalla asked Johun why the Sith would leave the mercenaries alive but kill their friends, Johun didn't have an answer, leading Johun to finally admit that they were probably lying about the Sith surviving the thought bomb. After which, Farfalla decided to take Johun on as his Padawan. Then, Farfalla told Johun that they were going to meet with the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, Valorum. Johun and Farfalla went to Coruscant to meet with Chancellor Valorum, which was also Johun's first time on Coruscant. Since he was recruited during the war, he had spent all his time in the field. Johun had a hard time adjusting to the city but stayed close to Farfalla, who was in his element. When Johun met the Chancellor, he noted how young he looked for his age and understood why the people would elect him as the first non-Jedi Chancellor in over 400 years. Johun listened as the Chancellor spoke with Farfalla about a bill called the Ruusan Reformation that would formally end the war against the Sith. The Ruusan Reformation would remove the Jedi from all military roles and force the Jedi to answer to the Republic. Johun waited for Farfalla to argue but was surprised when Farfalla agreed to the terms. Johun was angry at first, but Farfalla explained the war was over and Jedi were supposed to be ambassadors of peace, not seeking fight, so Johun agreed with Farfalla. Johun had spent his entire time as a Jedi in constant war and forgot what it truly meant to be a Jedi in peacetime, but Johun promised to do his best to learn from Farfalla. 3 days after the Ruusan Reformations passed, Johun was called to Farfalla's office where he informed Johun that the team he snuck to Ruusan with was found dead. They suspect that they were killed by Sith mercenaries to escape Ruusan. Farfalla told Johun not to seek revenge on the killers. Farfalla then told Johun that he had a special mission for him and assigned him as Chancellor Valorum's personal bodyguard. Johun didn't want to accept but did because he knew he had to put his personal wants aside as a Jedi. Farfalla told him this was his final test and the Jedi Council decided Johun was ready to be a knight, and thus Johun was officially knighted. 10 years go by and Johun was traveling with Valorum alone because the Chancellor refused a guard now that he had officially stepped down as Supreme Chancellor. Johun tried to get Valorum to travel with a guard, but Valorum felt he was in no danger. Johun noted that Valorum had actually helped the Republic during his term and brought many planets into the fold of the Republic. Johun and Valorum had arrived on Sereno, so Valorum could try to convince the 6 wealthiest families to stop supporting separatist factions. They land at the spaceport of Count Nalju, an ally of the Republic, and from there Johun and Valorum planned to meet with the other families. The landing pad was on top of a large outcropping of land far above the water. Johun noted the lack of safety railings, which was symbolism for Sereno culture, but it also made Johun worry for Valorum's safety. Valorum's arrival was supposed to be small to avoid fanfare, so Johun wasn't surprised when there was only 4 servants there to greet Valorum. As Johun and Valorum crossed over a walkway, Johun got a premonition through the Force that something bad was going to happen. Johun could sense that everyone around him was armed, but before he had a chance to react, they blew the landing pad. Johun was able to save Valorum before he fell and turned to face the others. They pulled out weapons lined with cortosis. Johun was able to defend himself against 3 attackers at once, using Form 6, which was the only form he really knew since he spent the last 10 years as a diplomat, not a fighter. His skill had greatly deteriorated. Yet even with his skills not up to where they were, he still killed 2 of the attackers while the 3rd tried to run, only to be killed by a 4th attacker, a Twi'lek. The 4th attacker was a red-skinned Twi'lek and was far more skilled than the first 3 combined, but he lacked the Force. The duel was intense, but no matter how well Johun dueled, the Twi'lek was 1 step ahead of him as they fought. Johun walked backwards to the edge where he realized he wasn't good enough to beat the Twi'lek. So Johun resigned to death. He grabbed the Twi'lek and fell backwards over the edge, taking the assassin with him. Johun gave himself to the Force, ready to die as they fell 50 meters into the water, but as they hit the water, Johun realized he was alive. Johun had given himself over to the Force. In exchange, the Force spared him. Johun saw the body of the Twi'lek and started to climb the ladder up the rock formation, where Valorum thanked Johun for saving his life. After this, Johun returned to Coruscant. Farfalla had sent for Johun as soon as he landed at the Jedi Temple. When he got to Farfalla's room, it turned out that he wanted to talk to Johun about an upcoming memorial. Johun had asked Valorum to build a memorial to Hoth and the Jedi who gave their lives during the Battle of Ruusan. Farfalla and the Council saw this as vain, but Johun saw this as giving the Republic a symbol of hope. Farfalla realized he couldn't convince Johun otherwise, and Johun said he was going to oversee the construction of the Valley of the Jedi. While Johun was on Ruusan overseeing construction, they kept running into issues with vandals who were delaying construction, so Johun decided to try and catch them himself. Johun stayed awake for 2 days straight when finally on the 3rd day he caught a glimpse of the vandal and gave chase. Johun noted that the vandal was partially attuned to the Force. Johun kept up and followed the vandal all the way to his hut where he gave up and invited Johun in. Once the vandal took his coat off, Johun recognized him as the famed healing hermit of Ruusan. The hermit argued with Johun that the Jedi were blinded by their hate for the Sith and didn't care who died in their way, but Johun argued it was a necessary sacrifice for the Jedi to sacrifice themselves with the thought bomb if it meant wiping out the Sith. That's when the hermit told Johun that the Sith weren't wiped out and that one survived and even cut off his hand. The hermit revealed the name of the Sith, Darth Bane. After some debate, Johun convinced the hermit to come to Coruscant and tell the Jedi Council about the Sith so they could act. Johun brought him to the Jedi Temple where Johun talked to Farfalla first. As they compared details of the hermit's story, Farfalla realized there may be truth in this Darth Bane claim. Farfalla decides to speak with the hermit himself before taking him before the council. Johun had left the hermit in the archives to wait, but when Farfalla and Johun arrived, he was gone. They searched and found out he left with a girl that Johun and Farfalla suspected was Darth Bane's apprentice. Johun and Farfalla found out what she was researching, a path to Tython, birthplace of the Jedi. Johun asked Farfalla to speak with the council and get them to act, but Farfalla knew they wouldn't act fast enough. So he tells Johun they will handle Darth Bane and his apprentice themselves, then sends Johun to get 2 Jedi that Farfalla knew would help. Johun had arrived on Tython with Farfalla and 3 other Jedi. One was the greatest duelist the Jedi had at the time, another was her former Padawan, and the 3rd was an Ithorian who knew battle meditation. Johun, Farfalla, the duelist, Raskta, her former Padawan, Saro, all charged into the room with Darth Bane and his apprentice, while the Ithorian Jedi stayed outside the room using battle meditation to boost the Jedi. Farfalla and Raskta attacked Darth Bane while Johun and Saro attacked his apprentice. Johun and Sorrow chased her into a corner of the room where she could more easily defend her flanks. As they fought, she noted the difference in skill between Johun and Sorrow. Johun was far less skilled and basic, to the point where she saw Sorrow miss opportunities to attack because Johun was getting in the way while trying to help. Then, when she thought she had the pattern down in a moment to spare, she looked at Darth Bane and noticed he hadn't killed either of his opponents, Farfalla and Rasta. This fraction of a second distraction was nearly fatal. Sorrow attacked her, which she barely blocked. Then Sorrow attacked again and knocked her to the ground. However, when she knew Sorrow could kill her, Johun jumped in to try and finish her off, which she was able to avoid and get back up into her defensive position. She even saw an opening to kill Johun but didn't take it because he was hindering Sorrow more than helping him. Farfalla and Rasta called for backup, so Sorrow told Johun that he would handle the apprentice, as Johun left to fight Darth Bane. Johun joined them and noticed Bane was trying to attack the Othone, who was giving the Jedi battle meditation. Together, Johun, Farfalla, and Rasta attacked Darth Bane, and unlike with Sorrow, Rasta seemed to work better with Johun rather than him getting in the way. They were locked, with Bane stuck on the defensive, but the Jedi unable to breach his defenses when Johun noticed a gap in Bane's defenses. He took the opening and drove his saber towards Bane's hand. Johun hit it, but not deep enough to cut it off. Bane then sent a force push that knocked all three to the ground. Bane then went to kill the Othorian and take battle meditation away, but Johun pushed the Othorian out of the way with the force, saving his life. Johun, Farfalla, and Rasta all continued their assault on Darth Bane as the Othorian resumed battle meditation, but Darth Bane's apprentice had won her duel, snuck up behind them, and stabbed Rasta in the back. Darth Bane took Johun and Farfalla's surprise as an opening, then cut off Johun's hand and cut off Farfalla's head. Just before Bane could kill Johun with Force Lightning, the Othorian used the last of his power to trap Bane in a bubble and reflect his own lightning back at him. Johun crawls towards his lightsaber, determined to keep fighting, but Darth Bane's apprentice walked over and ended Johun's life. Johun was not a good duelist. He was trained in a time of war, but it was also stated that he only constructed his lightsaber a few weeks before the thought bomb went off, which means he probably didn't see that much combat during the war. Afterwards, when Johun was Valorum's guard, he only did the basic to keep his lightsaber skill from going dull. Instead, he became a diplomat as his skill in political discussion became his strength. He was capable of basic force techniques like force push and mind trick. He was also able to enhance his own physicals and use the force to soothe and calm people. So it was tough for me to place him on a rank. Johun is an interesting character, but his skill and force power was low. Even while enhanced by battle meditation, he only got in Sorrow's way while fighting Darth Xana, and he was nearly killed by the Twi'lek assassin who couldn't use the force. I nearly put him in the weak category. I ended up putting him in average after thinking about it for a while. He still did have some war experience. He was able to fight 3 assassins at once, and during his fight with Darth Bane, he was the only one to actually injure Bane with a lightsaber. His force abilities weren't bad. You could think on a whim, like when he pushed War out of the way of Bane's saber right after tanking a push himself. So I ended up putting him in average. Fun fact, Johun was originally first mentioned in Power of the Jedi sourcebook. Then his character was expanded upon in Darth Bane, Rule of 2. Thank you all for listening to this character breakdown. If you have a character you want to see me break down, then drop a name in the comments. If you enjoyed, subscribe for more. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.